Fundamentally, the job of a union to raise workers' expectations from our point of view, raise hopes, right, constantly. And the answer to the very difficult questions about what's wrong with our labor movement and why it's going over a cliff, I don't think, my time up, Christopher? Yeah.
It just went out.
You want this bread? And I think everyone in this room would agree that it's all about empowering workers.
We want light.
That's the only answer. The complicated, difficult thing is how do we get there? This recent Madison, Wisconsin, just incredibly inspiring movement from workers, I think is an example of the potential of where we can get to in this country, and the way that labor leaders or institutional labor reacted is an example of what's wrong. Again, in our opinion, and this is from afar in California, I haven't been to Madison, institutional labor and labor leaders should have rushed to the front of that line and raised people's expectations and raised hopes, right, and defended people's standards, which are so well reserved, as opposed to compromising right away in the economic demands, of the governor, and saying just don't touch our institution, right? Collective bargaining rights, our dues machine. Well, we in California think that we really have accomplished that. This is over like a 25-year period. Empowering workers, right, to really own their union and control their relationship with their boss. I want to give you a quick, 5-minute summary of who we are and how we get here. The details are in this book that Steve Early wrote, and I really encourage you to read it. It's incredibly well researched and documented throughout here. Copies right there. Folks are interested in how much? $15?
They're on sale for $14.
On sale for $14. The union that I helped lead, and I was one of hundreds of this incredible collective, SEIU, United Healthcare Western California. 2 years ago, when we were taken over by the International, we're 150,000 healthcare workers, fastest growing healthcare workers union in the country. Perhaps more important, highest standards for private sector healthcare workers, higher than in New York, my friends here in New York, in terms of wages and benefits, defined benefit pensions across the board, family health coverage, high wages, and most importantly, a real voice in determining how care is given, to be able to advocate for their patients, a real voice in staffing levels, third-party resolution disagreements on that, and the most politically involved union in California by far. And it's because, again, we learned how to empower workers, right? We had a training and education program that had a dozen full-time people in it, not organizers, but adult educators, to really bring information to people, to empower them. In addition to paying 2% in dues, which is a lot of money, over half of these 150,000 workers voluntarily paid $5 into Coke, right? Because they could control how that money was spent, and they were in charge of who to endorse or what issues to take up, through a democratic process. Again, so this union was so successful because folks were truly empowered. Around 2006, the leadership of SEIU started going on in this direction of wanting to control that power. And they actually, with a number of national employers who are headquartered in California in terms of their dues base, started trading that power of the workers in California in exchange for organizing rights with these employers in other states. Trading standards, compromising standards for the workers in California in exchange to organize workers, dues members in Texas and Florida. We found out about it. We constructively tried to stop them in a real constructive way for years. They responded with retaliation against the leaders of this great union with an unprecedented campaign against these folks to discredit their leaders. It didn't work. Finally, after a year of kangaroo courts, internal process accusing us of stealing money, in January of 2009, they gave our leaders an ultimatum. And that ultimatum was really twofold. One, at our will, DC's will, they can transfer thousands, whatever they want, of workers out of our union to weaken it into a union with appointed leaders by Andy Stern, without a vote, at will. And number two, we had to accept an SEIU constitutional amendment that gave the authority to bargain contracts with the president of SEIU, not the workers. He had the authority to appoint bargaining committees, to to actually do the bargaining, however he wanted, or she, today, right, however she wants to. And they worked it in a way that if we disobeyed that order, they would have the legal authority to take us over. In a week's notice, over 5,000 shop stewards, elected stewards, came together to deal with this ultimatum, and understanding that they would lose all their democratic rights by rejecting it, they voted nearly unanimously to say no. The next day, the next week, SEIU put us in trusteeship, fired a 100-member executive board, fired over 200 staff that were loyal to this movement, and NUHW, National Union of Healthcare Workers, was born. Not a new union, not a new movement, leaders that have been in this for 30, some 40 years, but a new name. And in a 6-week period, with no paid staff, over 100,000 of these workers filed supermajority petitions with the NLRB to leave SEIU and join NUHW so they could control their lives, their union, their relationship with their employer. Little did we know back then the ability of SEIU, just like the worst boss, to collude with these employers, and with the cooperation of the NLRB, not allow these workers to vote. For a year and a half, 2 years, in some cases now 26 months after filing these petitions, workers were not given an opportunity to vote on this question about changing unions. The only time they were allowed to vote is when SEIU finally felt comfortable that a particular hospital, with them having all the resources, all the staff, the relationship with the employer, all the access, they would drop the charges, unblock the election, and let the vote happen. And despite that process, a supermajority of the elections that we have been able to contest, we won. And today we represent a little over 8,000 workers with about 20 different employers in California. Just think about that. And it's just the demonstration of the power of these workers, how deep the leadership was, and how these leaders were followed by their constituents. And by example, next week, after 25 months, there's 2 nursing home elections that we're going to win. Finally, the board said to SEIU, enough, you can't delay it any longer, and they're scheduling the elections. Next month, there's 5 hospitals in the Bay Area. 26 months ago, these folks filed for an election. We haven't had a staff person in these hospitals, no access by the employer. SEIU's bargain contracts, right? And now is saying if you leave us, you're going to lose everything in this contract. Despite all of that, these workers are going to win that election 26 months later. In the last 2 years, every single contract that SEIU has bargained, without exception, has included huge takeaways in pension, health benefits, wages, voice on the job. The standards that these workers won over 10 decades in 2 years are being destroyed, right? And they're being exchanged for the ability to organize other workers that work for these employers, or the total collaboration with SEIU against NUHW, against these workers' union, because the bosses want SEIU to win. With me? So today now our number one focus is bargaining contracts for these 8,000 workers. And it's an incredibly difficult environment, because now the competitors of these employers all pay less, right? SEIU has agreed to lower standards, and our members are not willing to accept any less. So I'll just give you one example. We had our first strike a week and a half ago, NUHW's first strike, for 1,150 registered nurses at Kaiser Permanente's premier hospital in Los Angeles. And first time in my career, 1,150 of these 1,150 nurses went on strike for a 24-hour strike. Not one single staff. One staff person assigned to this hospital, right? So you can, just tremendous demonstration of power to Kaiser. And every LA TV station was there, CNN covered it. It was just tremendously successful strike. Our number 2 priority after winning these contracts, to one, because it's our responsibility, and 2, just to establish a base, is to help other workers. There are tens of thousands of not only SEIU members, but unorganized workers all over the country that we get calls every day because folks are inspired by who these workers are, right? And I'll give you a couple examples. Therapists in Northern California, came to us and want to join us. Our first question is, how come you didn't call SEIU? They're the Union of Healthcare Workers in California. And their answer was because we want to control the relationship with our employer. We want to control that. We want to bargain the contract we want, not some third-party entity. In Southern California, leaders of 3 hospitals, non-union hospitals, are meeting with us now. And their answer to that question is because we want a fighting union. We don't want to join a union to have another boss dictate to us what we're supposed to do. So that's where we are today. We're also in the process of rewriting our Constitution with a goal to have a vote of our members on a new Constitution by this September, and then have direct election of officers. We want to rewrite this Constitution to reflect who we are and try to deal with some of the problems of some future leader of NUHW. Mark, you raised a good question, or a good point to make. We can't just change the chair. Who's sitting in the chair? We have to change the process so that workers are protected in the future. So we're struggling with how to make it mandatory for the president and the officers of this union to not lose touch with rank and file members. And we're supporting them, salary caps and retirement age. Some of the things that we're talking about this morning. Finally, we just, like you, believe in a progressive majority for this country. And someday, workers having quality jobs, quality wages, health care, quality retirement, affordable housing, quality education. And we don't believe that any of those things can happen without a progressive labor movement in this country leading it because of the resources that labor has access to. And the only way that's going to happen is if workers are truly empowered. It's a grassroots, bottom-up movement. So thanks for being here, and we'd love to talk about other things that you want to talk about.